Welcome to our webinar, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come learn about how you can boost fundraising at your next peer-to-peer event. We know that being a fundraiser is a ton of work, and it is really exciting that you're able to make it here today to hear what Mark has to share with you. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Abby, and I am part of the team over at QGift. We are all about helping nonprofits raise more money, whether it's online or through other avenues, and we love peer-to-peer fundraising in particular. We've seen some of our clients run really amazing, world-changing events, and we are so thrilled that someone like Mark is willing to share how to boost engagement overall and improve your fundraising. I know there are a lot of QGift clients here with us today. I see some familiar names in there. We are super excited to see you. Let me know if you have any questions about how to work any of this information into your peer-to-peer events in the future. And if you're not a QGift client, it's totally great. Everything applies to you too. And you can let me know if you have any questions about working with QGift or how the peer-to-peer fundraising part works on our end. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, so we'll send you a copy after the webinar is complete. You should get an email from me with the link to the recording and some other cool resources and links tomorrow or Friday morning at the latest. And if you are a Twitter person, go ahead and check us out over at QGift. We're going to be live tweeting some of the highlights of today's session. And while you're logged into Twitter, make sure you go follow Cathexis at this handle, Cathexis Partner. They share a ton of really great content and links and information over there as well. And then, of course, we will have time for a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, drop them in the chat box, and I will make sure that we get to ask Mark those questions. All of that being said, I am really excited to introduce you all to Mark Becker. He has worked in the nonprofit industry for more than a decade and is dedicated to helping nonprofits like you raise more money online with different fundraising technologies, particularly peer-to-peer fundraising. So, Mark, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Abby, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. As Abby mentioned, I am Mark Becker. I'm the founding partner of Cathexis Partners. We've been supporting nonprofits for the last 11 or so years. We basically help them take advantage or maximize the usage of their technology, or help them find or integrate different technology solutions. And we do that in a cost-effective way by having our folks be virtual, all working from our home offices across the United States, and really keeping low overhead so we can support nonprofits as efficiently as possible. And have a lot of experience well beyond the 11 years in peer-to-peer fundraising myself personally, and look forward to this discussion today. And as Abby says, please ask any questions along the way in the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of the conversation. But please ask those questions as they come to you, because I might be going through this pretty fast and furious, knowing my speaking style. All right, so on to the 11 simple ways to improve your peer-to-peer fundraising. This one goes all the way to the 11. All right, number 1, make your website easier to use. Sounds straightforward enough, right? But step back. If you've been doing the campaign for a while, step back and try to look at it with fresh eyes. Not always easy to do, right? Because you're so ingrained in it. You're looking at your site all the time. But try to step back at the beginning of a new season and take a fresh look at the registration and the donation and the how to learn more information about the campaign with fresh eyes as much as possible. Also share it with folks that might not be familiar with, friends of yours that might not be familiar with the campaign, or an aunt or an uncle or a grandfather, someone else completely unknown to the campaign, and get some feedback about it, just so you can look at it from fresh eyes. Because once you've been doing this long enough, and even if it's your first year, by the time you launch a site, you've seen it a lot, right? And you're focusing on fonts, you're focusing on branding, and not always necessarily, you might think you are, but might get distracted by the other things. So make sure you do think about it from a participant or constituent's perspective, and ask yourself questions like, is it clear what I need to do, what I want to learn more information about the campaign? What happens if I want to register? Is that an easy process? Or how about donate? And this is an example. Tippy Mud Run is actually a QGift client, and I think it says it all. It's really straightforward and simple, right? First of all, the register here and donate now buttons are really prominent on the site, along with links to sponsors, more information about junior achievement, their fundraising so far. And then as far as the actual event goes, first of all, the entire background, if you were to expand out on this, is all kinds of mud. And then the video, if you were to play that video, you'll see, what you're getting into. It's not just some 5K on a nice clean highway. It's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of mud. And all of that is very easy to determine right there on the home page. And not only just on a desktop, but also on a mobile device, on a smartphone. Really easy. You lose the videos further down, but the register and donate are right there. Facebook and Twitter login and connections are all right there, easy to reach. Really love that example. Then ask yourself, how many clicks does it take to sign up or donate? And then how many questions am I asking during the registration or donation process? And do we really need to ask all of them? And if I'm registering as a fundraiser, how easy is it for me to sign up and then actually start fundraising? What does that whole process look like? Here's the couple of screenshots here. Sometimes you just have to ask a lot of information. It's just necessary. Are you going to start a team? Are you going to form a team? Are you going to join a team? Are you going to register as an individual? And then, depending on that path, it takes you down a different path to registration. And then additional information might be very important. Are you of legal age? What's your T-shirt size? And then other questions may or may not be really important. In this screenshot I have here, what gender do you identify with is a very timely, topical question, politically correct question to ask in a lot of ways. But I would say, does it need to be on this registration form? Yes, if you have to be responsible for knowing if you need a certain number of porta potties, male, female facilities, that type of thing. But may or may not be important if you're doing a virtual campaign. Obviously, you'd like to know the demographics of your audience, but during the registration process, you want to keep the registration questions to a minimum. So up to you whether or not that one in particular is required, but something to consider. And then if they're donating, how easy is it to find the person they want to donate on behalf of? Again, this is the Tippy Mud Run example where I love it that as soon as you click on donate to somebody, it brings up a light box that totally takes over the screen, and then you put in a search, the name of the participant or the team name, and it makes it very clear this is your next step, minimizes distractions, that type of thing. And I just think that's a really nice, clean example. All right, tip number 2, offer a compelling message. What makes our organization unique, right? What impact are we having on our mission by having this campaign? What problems does this particular peer-to-peer fundraising campaign solve by existing? Right? I think someone, and I use this example several times and have used it for most of my career. This is actually the 3 days, what got me into the nonprofit space back in the 90s. I started volunteering for them. So I go back to this one quite often as a great example of a good branding message and a good way of marketing and talking to your audience. It always comes up, and I think it's a great example. It's a compelling message, commit 3 days so the future generations don't have to. Makes it really clear what they're trying to do, eliminate breast cancer, right? I think it's really compelling. How do we want people to feel about our campaign? Emotionally touched, inspired, angry, right? Again, 3-Day does an excellent job of that. 3 days, 60 miles, not as hard as breast cancer. It doesn't get any clearer than that, right? You got the great image there of a path to walk out in San Diego, and you just get a pretty good feel for the entire campaign. And then if you were watching the video, very inspirational. All right. Number 3, get the word out clearly, right? If you're asking someone, when you launch the campaign, your focus should be on getting people to register, right? There's a difference between asking people to register or asking someone to fundraise, and those are two different asks. Start out focusing on getting people to register, and then have your participants do the ask of a donation. Or after a certain point, you can ask people to donate if they haven't registered. But I would say start out, focus on getting people to register, and then once they're registered, then fundraise. Keep the message clear. I'm going to back up one slide. Again, nice, clean. This is Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida. Click here to start your virtual food drive. Just number 1, register. Once you get into that, obviously it's all about fundraising and raising funds for the campaign, but focus on step 1, which is getting people to sign up. Then once they're registered, this is a sample email I got when I registered for a 3-day during a testing phase with them as a client. Immediately got an email that says, thanks for registering, and here's your next steps. Get your first donation. Makes it really clear, and the email goes on and offers up some other things, but just really clear communication on what to do next. And then a couple days later, I received a follow-up message that went into even more detail, where let's get started. The first step is to log in to your participant center. Here's your password, your ID, or your ID, and click here if you forgot your password. Update your personal page, set your fundraising goal, list your potential donors, upload an address book, reach out to them via their fundraising app. So all very clear steps on once someone's registered to fundraise. And you don't have, I am using Susan G. Komen 3-Day as an example, and yes, they have a very large budget. Totally get that. But these are things that small organizations of any size and any number of staff can do a version of. Maybe you don't have an app, but there's nothing wrong with being able to expect to be able to send out emails with clear steps and toolkits to help your participants fundraise. And again, if they don't register, after a certain point, ask them to donate, and then also make it easier for your participants to ask for donations. Be it out on Facebook for your organization, or even once you you have someone register in the thank you page, make it easy for them to share that they've registered, or once they've donated, make it easy for folks that have even just donated to the campaign to share the fact that they've donated out on their social media in the thank you emails. Lots of easy tools you can drop in, add this, share this, and a lot of these things are being built in more and more into products like QGift and other peer-to-peer platforms. So use the social sharing features and make it as easy as possible for your constituents to get the word out and be evangelists for your campaign. All right. Use a multi-channel approach, right? Direct mail still exists, still should exist, and is right for certain audiences. Don't be afraid to use it if you have the budget and the means to be able to support that. Send out emails, obviously, to recruit participants, but don't stop there. Social media, obviously, create a hashtag around the campaign and share that. And again, tools like QGive, the screenshot is actually on the right, is actually from a QGive campaign where it shows recent activity within the campaign and makes it easy to share that activity in the campaign. I think that's just brilliant and smart, and where everything is headed, if not already there, right? On the screen, I also wanted to share another tip. You can check out Facebook ads library to see how different organizations ads are doing when it comes to different types of campaign. Let me just shoot over to a browser real quick. And what I'm talking about here is if you go to Facebook ads library, I'm going to back up one. It takes you to this. Oops. Let me go all the way back home, and you can go to the Facebook ad library, and I'm just going to type in walk, and you can search by anything you want to, certain different criteria, different names. I'm going to just look up, for example, this ending hunger one step. Here's a sponsored ad that the Crop Walk in Oak Park, Illinois, I believe it is, recently promoted in Facebook ads, and this will show kind of the results of that. It reached less than 1,000 people, but cost less than $100. And here's the breakdown of the audience it went to, male versus female, and the area. Obviously, it's a Illinois walk, so they're focused on people in Illinois. It just gives a lot of information about the ad, and I think it's a really useful tool to be able to see if perhaps if you're not doing Facebook ads, if that's something to consider, and if you are, see how you're doing compared to other ads out there and see which ones are performing well. All right, so don't forget social media. Online advertising. We recently put out a free guide, a nonprofit introductory guide to Google ad grants you can download from our website. There's plenty of other Google ads. Is a great thing to take advantage of. If you haven't previously, they'll give away up to $10,000 worth of free Google ads per month. There's some catches there. There's some things you have to do to maintain that grant, but very, very helpful. Think about online advertising outside of the norm, maybe even something like on Twitch, which is for live stream gaming primarily, but live stream community, and it's really gaining in popularity. That screenshot on the left is Extra Life, which is a Children Miracle Network campaign that they do within Twitch, and it's all about live stream fundraising, and they also advertise for the campaign within there. So there's a lot of variety of different ways to advertise online these days, and I think it's worth taking a look at, figuring out where your audience and your potential participants are at, and figuring out how to advertise to them there. Also consider signs or table drops at other events that your organization is doing. If you're doing a gala, that might be a great time to announce the next year's campaign, peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns. Get the word out there however you have it, while you definitely have the audience while you have your audience's attention. Consider PSAs, public service announcements might be another way to go. Local media, TV and radio shows. Again, an example, since I'm in Central Florida here, Central Florida Second Harvest, Central Florida Food Bank teams up with the local NBC station, WESH 2, every year here, and they do a Share Your Christmas campaign. And they do a lot of actual physical food drives and pickups at different locations, but also share the links to the virtual food drive peer-to-peer fundraising campaign, and it has been very successful. So if you can make those connections and team up with your local broadcasters, it can be very fruitful for you. Know your key participants. It's really important to, most peer-to-peer events have a similar model in that a small percentage of participants actually raise funds, or at least the most funds. And quite often, if it's a walk or a competitive 5K, something of that nature, you might have a lot of $0 fundraisers. You should try to focus on them and try to get them to raise their first $50, but more importantly, you should focus on the folks that have raised money and find out what's the commonalities in those people, and figure out what makes them tick. And they are usually the people that are most impacted by or dedicated to your cause. So how do you find more people like them? And the answer to that question really depends on your specific organization, but it's really important to ask that question and then dig in further and try to find more people like that, so that you can get those key fundraisers and stakeholders and cheerleaders. Then leverage your participants to help them share the story of what's working, and how successful, and how they did it. Maybe it's getting somebody that's raised over $10,000 or over $5,000 or whatever. Maybe it's the first $100 and they just thought it was really difficult. They thought it was going to be really difficult, but they found it was really easy. If they can share that story with you and then give permission for you to share that with your constituents, that can be really, really invaluable. So see if you can, spotlight some of your fundraisers. This is a screenshot from the Alzheimer's Association's Longest Day, and they have a Twitter feed that brings in tweets from that day throughout the day as people were fundraising. And that's another thing, is just highlight people's fundraising efforts and what they're doing. Ask your top performers how else they might want to help, and see if you can use their stories to recruit other participants. And then tie the money to something real, right? Again, this is going back to the mud run example. When you go to donate to somebody, they actually have giving levels that explain, what that money would go towards, or how $10 would get you a junior achievement for a youth. Your $10 will provide a curriculum for one elementary school student. That's a great example. $50 donation provides 2 middle school students a complete curriculum. And it just goes on from there. Really gives tangible understanding to where the money is impacting. And I think that is really, really powerful. All right. Number 8, have follow-up procedures, right? Create a process for communicating with your team captains, and if possible, communicate with everybody. Obviously, autoresponders that go out system generated, that's great, but then reach out to obviously you probably don't have time to reach out to everybody, but reach out to the team captains, communicate with them, make sure that they're being heard and valued. Have a plan for reaching out to top fundraisers and your VIPs, connecting with them and getting their feedback and thanking them for their involvement. Develop a clear thank you program to ensure everybody feels appreciated to whatever level. Make that not just a general message, but customized and personalized, right, in communications in general. And then taking it to the next level, connect directly, right? Call those people. Send a handwritten note. Text them. Reach out and in fact, I recently did a conference session, and one person in the audience mentioned that they actually do call. That they have a group of people that calls every individual that registers. That's great. You might not have that kind of bandwidth or that kind of ability, but try to spot check it. Try to do that with the top fundraisers and your top teams. A handwritten note goes a long way in this day and age. A personal text, or an automated text that seems personal. Just connect with folks directly and make them feel unique. And then have a good look at your software platform. and make sure it's meeting your needs and has a functionality that you and your constituents need. We recently put out an update to our second edition of the peer-to-peer fundraising technology landscape paper, where we looked at 39 different platforms, peer-to-peer fundraising platforms. You can download that from our site for free as well. And it evaluates different platforms on a variety of criteria. But every campaign is unique and every need is unique. So make sure you find the right platform for you to make sure that it's successful as possible. But regardless of your budget, what platform you have, a lot of these tips you can include into your different campaigns. All right, and at the end of the day, it all comes down to just have a strategized change, right? Think of small tactical ways that you can improve your bottom line. Like the previous 10 examples are all very specific tactical things you can look at doing. It really comes down to making those small incremental changes to improve your campaign. You need to give your peer-to-peer fundraising a boost. You don't necessarily need to do a complete overhaul. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater and start from scratch. You might have to do a complete rebranding. You might have to do a lot of things, but small incremental changes can really make a huge difference. All right, I blew through that amazingly quick. Leaving plenty of time for questions. But before we get to those, I did want to just reference a couple of different things. Check out our blog at cathexispartners.com/blog. And we also have a virtual conference that we do once a year with several other hosts. Peertopeerworld.com. That's a free virtual conference coming up in September. Great resources there, and you can also view past sessions about peer-to-peer fundraising. And don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. But all of that said, would love to answer any questions.
Yeah, well, one thing that has come up in this webinar and then some other webinars, is there a guideline you use to set the participant fundraising goals that in a way that can encourage people to get and stay involved, or how do you navigate the amount you ask people to raise?
Oh, I love that question. And I'm going to give you initially a horrible answer and then see if I can go deeper into that, right? It depends. If it's a legacy event, it's easier because you can look at past fundraising, right, and see what people actually did. And then look for around the 75 percentile of actual fundraisers and put the suggested fundraising goals, somewhere around that. Maybe up it up a little bit, but take out your outliers, like your extreme fundraisers, and then your $0 fundraisers, and then look for that upper quartile to put in your total, your suggested fundraising goal. If you haven't done it before, maybe look at other similar campaigns, and then use that as a starting point.
Okay, that is really helpful. I know a lot of times we encounter people who are running their first peer-to-peer event and don't know where to start. So giving them the idea of looking at similar campaigns is a really big help. We had someone ask, if you have only a little bit of time, if you are a single person fundraising shop or are short-staffed, do you have one or two of these 11 tips that you recommend and would prioritize over some of the other ones? Which one would you do?
Definitely all about the way you're coaching your recruitment communications and your fundraising communications. Focus on clear communication and coaching around that, and primarily you're looking at your email follow-up after someone registers and leading into someone registering, and then all the way through to the event and post-event follow-up. I'd definitely say look at your communications calendar first and tighten that up. That's where you can get the most bang for buck.
Okay, definitely. Do you have any suggestions about segmenting those communications?
Yes. When it comes to recruitment, start looking at your past captains, team captains, and top fundraisers first, and maybe invite them first, and then open it up to the general audience and make them feel like those team captains and top fundraisers are on the inside. And then once you get into the fundraising side of things and someone's already registered, really conditionalize and personalize your communications so that you're not just sending out nothing worse than someone that's already raised $1,000 saying, "Hey, here's some tips to raise your first $50." So you really want to be careful how you communicate to people and segment it based on what actions they have or haven't taken. Like maybe update your personal page if they haven't updated it yet, or great job on raising X so far, and if you can bring that in, funds raised to date into the email query, that type of thing. Use the platform or your email tools as much as they allow you to personalize and conditionalize and segment your audience.
That's really helpful advice. And it kind of leads me into another question that Shelley asked. Talking kind of about segmenting, do you have any best practice recommendations around handling event sponsors versus handling donors versus handling fundraisers? How do you target your messaging to each of those groups, do you think?
Yeah, sponsors, you should have, and that's where it becomes important to know as much as you can about your audience without tripping them up on asking too many questions during registration, right? There's the rub. So you want to be able to share with sponsors or potential sponsors, as much biographical information to show them that your participants are the same people that are their customers. So it's a bit of a rub on asking enough questions, but making sure you make it a low threshold to register. But once you have that information, share the general statistics with your sponsors to get them, excited, engaged, and wanting to be involved, and then reaching out to them to ask for their involvement. And then as far as, consider everybody a registrant or a potential registrant until after the third email that they've received saying, please join us. Obviously, you shouldn't say the same thing 3 times, but after that third come join us and, participate email, turn them into potential supporters. You've tried enough times. They're not available or they're not interested. So see if they'll potentially be a virtual participant if that's an option in your campaign, or fundraise. So it's really all just about mining your data and segmenting it as smartly as you're able to based on the information you have.
Okay, that is really helpful. And as I'm hearing you talk, it sounds like a lot of that tip, but a lot of all 11 tips are heavily focused on engagement and coaching. Is there like a formula you recommend for nonprofits to help them kind of prioritize their time? Should they spend a certain percentage of time working on coaching, or is that kind of a variable from event to event?
Yeah, I don't. If there is a formula, I haven't come up with that yet. I wish there was. I think there's so many things and so many organizations that decide. It depends on your size and the staff allocation and all that. But again, your return on investment, I found, is going to be on how you're communicating and how you're empowering your constituents to basically work as an extension of your staff, right? And have them fundraise on your behalf. So anything you can do to empower them and to make them be able to fundraise on your behalf and lower the hurdles to them doing that is going to be your time best spent.
Okay. Is there a tip kind of in this list that you see a lot of nonprofits maybe failing to include so we can be aware when we build our next campaigns that we should include that tip or that strategy?
Yeah, I think the branding, the message, and the reason to get involved, the reason why their participation and their donation is so important. I think that is really probably the thing we see softballed or kind of overlooked most often in campaigns.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. Huh. So when you have someone kind of coming up with the content in the story, do you have any tips to help them, maybe some resources they can look at that can help them not softball it and really create a hard-hitting message?
Yeah, on our website we have a few different resources available to download that kind of walk through the process of thinking through your entire campaign. But I also think, just sitting down and creating a persona for your audience, and you can look at a larger engagement with an agency that can help create professionally sketched, caricatures of what Donna donor looks like. But you don't need to do that. You can just sit down with a pen and paper and a beverage of choice, and just think through who your audience is, right? And use your not just based on what you think, but looking at your reports of who's been, what you have biographically about your past participants, and just being on event, looking at pictures of past events if it's a physical event, just figuring out who your participants are and who your donors are, and then create a story or a persona for those people, and then try to see if the branding and the strategy and the way you're communicating them would resonate with those people.
That is wonderful, and I'm really happy you brought up the concept of a persona. That's something that we at QGift try to do anytime we write an ebook or a blog entry. We imagine an audience member that we've named, and we even have ideas of what they look like, and we imagine that we're writing for them. And it's remarkable how much easier it is to write something in a way that's understandable if we imagine that we're speaking to someone that we kind of already know.
Totally.
Well, those are the questions that we've gotten for this webinar. Thank you so much for sharing so much information. Everyone, following up with you, I'll have an email to you either tomorrow or Friday at the latest that will contain a recording of this webinar. I'll include links to a lot of the resources that Mark mentions in this webinar, and I'll also send you an ebook that we wrote a little while ago about finding your participants and engaging them. So it takes most of the strategies in this webinar and kind of expands upon them a little bit in a written format so you can revisit it whenever you want. Mark, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to show us these 11 tips. I know our social media strategist was messaging me while you were talking because she was so excited about some of the stuff that she learned from you. So I really appreciate you sharing this with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for joining us today.
Perfect. All right, everyone, that concludes our webinar for the day. Keep an eye out for that follow-up email. I will also include a link to an upcoming webinar where I will expand on some of QGift's fundraising tools for participants and how they can help you put some of these practices into practice. So keep an eye out for that. You will hear from me very soon. I hope the rest of you have a great Wednesday.
Take care, everyone.